Hello and welcome to part 3 of our video blog series, Fund Managers Uncovered. Let's just recap what we've learned so far. Researchers Richard Taffler and David Tuckett interviewed more than 50 top fund managers from Europe, Asia and the United States. In part 1, our researchers explained that fund managers have an impossible job. In a zero-sum game, they can only succeed at each other's expense. In part 2, we learnt how fund managers like to portray themselves as rational and unemotional, but are in fact very emotional about the stocks they invest in. So how do fund managers cope with the enormous pressure they're under and the constant uncertainty surrounding the global financial markets? One way they do it, the researchers found, is by telling stories. David Tuckett explains.
The amount of financial information today is just massive. The number of stocks or other forms of investment you can engage in is massive. The number of financial comments, programs such as yours. So it's a kind of funny situation of always having too much information, but also never quite enough to be sure. And so you combine this information into a story, and the great thing about a story is it can smoothly get rid of information. You know, a good story, like a good novel, can tell a very complicated story about real life problems, right? But it leaves out a lot of things in order to be a good story. But that's what helps people organize and feel convinced about what they're doing.
Stories and the ability to tell stories, both to yourself and to your clients, managers, consultants, and the media, is an integral part of the fund management process. When we talk about stories, what we're referring to is the way in which we make sense of what we do and the world around us.
I would sit there and listen to one person telling me why, for example, he should buy stocks in the Canadian Pacific Railroad, for instance, and he would tell me a very interesting account story with all sorts of figures about the amount of trade from the US to China, how all the ports on the west side of the US are full up. You know, it's going to be a complete logjam. You have to build new ports, build a railway from, and you know, if you hear this kind of story, you think, oh, it makes a great deal of sense, etc. But of course what I could also do then is perhaps a few days later talk to someone else who might explain exactly why this particular project was a great project, was going to cost too much, or it wasn't going to work, or there's going to be not, you know, another port somewhere else, or some problem like that.
Stories carry emotion, and fundamentally one has to enter into an emotional relationship with one's stocks if one is going to accept the risk to invest.
It's a fantasy, it's an idea of something which is more than realistically possible. A good analogy would be that when we fall in love, naturally we endow the person we fall in love with characteristics which are kind of part of the person's characteristics, but exaggerated or idealized. And this enables us to make the kind of commitment that's necessary. For example, you get married. After all, most people who are married know that the reality of it, or of having children, is lots of kind of things that are very negative. But of course, if you start on this with a great love affair, that can get you into it, and then gradually as life goes past, it can become more realistic. There are real benefits, real frustrations, but on balance, it's okay.
That's it for now. Join us again for the 4th and final part of Fund Managers Uncovered.